record. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you all. And I'm all mute everybody so that there's no background noise. So hang on just a moment while I get that all set up. Hang on, this is. All right, I'm going to ask you all to mute yourselves. And I can't find that feature now. Now that I have the presentation up, I can't find that. Anyway, so we'll get started here. Can everyone see my screen, or is there a big black box in the middle of it? Should I? You can all see it?
It looks good.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks good.
It looks all right. Okay, great. All right, so we're going to get started here. First of all, I just want to mention, what is a stream crossing, since that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. Stream crossings refer to structures such as culverts and bridges that carry a load over a river, stream, wetland, or other water body. And the way that they're built and how they function is essential to the health of a watershed, keeping water moving and sediment moving and connecting lakes, ponds, rivers, and streams, and as well as all the associated wildlife within that watershed. So this is a huge collaboration, the Saco River Stream Crossings Assessment Project. As you can see underneath the WHO heading there are a lot of collaborators on this effort, and it's going to be a multi-year effort. For everything from trainings to equipment to personnel time in the field, doing the data collection, acquiring funding resources, running the models, doing the quality assurance and quality control of the data, and then prioritization of crossings to replace. And then working closely with towns, road agents, Department of Public Works, and other stakeholders throughout this process. There's going to be a lot of collaboration going on. So right from the get-go, I have to acknowledge these awesome partners that we have from New Hampshire Fish and Game, Diane Timmons and Ben Nugent, and also Ashley Newell from formerly from North Country Council and now from Natural Resources Conservation Service, have been instrumental in helping us to launch this in the Ossipee watershed this summer. So what are we going to be doing? We're going to be using the New Hampshire Culvert Assessment Protocol to collect information to rate each culvert for its compatibility with the stream, its resistance to flooding, and its ability to allow fish and other aquatic species to pass through. So we're doing these assessments of culverts, but also concurrently there's going to be fish community surveys, which Ben can speak more to, and also Diane can speak more to, across the Saco River watershed. This is all happening starting this summer in the Ossipee watershed, so the lower region of the greater Saco River watershed. This summer, we're focusing on Effingham, Ossipee, and Freedom. And next year, we'll be focusing on Madison, Sandwich, Tamworth, and the rest of the Saco River watershed. So we're going to be doing this to evaluate the stream connectivity and areas of impact within the southern portion of the Saco River watershed. The information that we generate from these assessments will be used to rate each stream crossing for its compatibility, like I said, with aquatic organism passage and geomorphic compatibility. Okay. So as far as the project background goes, I'll give you a little history here. The Saco River watershed is about 1,300 square miles. It includes 50 municipalities in New Hampshire and Maine. 32 of those are in New Hampshire. There's 20,000 stream crossings in New Hampshire, and to date, 8,400 have been assessed. In 2020, New Hampshire DES updated the protocol, and Diane explained to me just a few minutes ago that since 2012, the state has required that all culverts be reassessed, even if they were just assessed not too long before that, following Hurricane Irene, because it impacted so many of our watersheds in the state. So it would be difficult to use the data pre-2012. So folks like Effingham, who had their culverts assessed in 2006, you know, they would need to have them updated and using this newly updated 2020 DES protocol. The Saco River watershed is one of the last watersheds to be done in this state. And Diane and Ben have been involved in helping to do the assessments for other watersheds throughout the state. So they have a lot of experience and expertise to lend this study of our Saco watershed. And I just wanted to also point out that in 2019, I was at a meeting at the Beach River Dam over in Ossipee, and this is when kind of the seed was planted for Green Mountain to get involved in this project, for me anyways, after meeting with Bill Thompson from New Hampshire DES, who was speaking with me about aquatic habitat connectivity and, you know, impacts that the potential dam removal might have on that. And just that this was a big unknown because we don't have the information on, you know, those stream crossings. So, so that's when I kind of started to think about this. And then Saco Headwaters Alliance, or SHA, S-H-A, really brought things to coalesce for us in connecting us with all these other agencies this winter and the spring. So that's how things kind of evolved. And then I just wanted to also mention that this is a watershed-wide effort. And the important thing about that is that all of our surface and groundwater are connected, as many of you know. And all of our water bodies and groundwater function as an ecosystem. So deficiencies, fragmentation, pollution, vulnerabilities in one town, all that can affect the system as a whole. So this is really an excellent opportunity for collaboration to leverage support, access larger pools of funding, and protect community infrastructure and property and natural resources like fish and water quality long-term and on a watershed-wide scale. So it's a great opportunity for the Ossipee watershed towns to move forward and make some progress with protecting the watershed and the health of our watershed. So I want to show you a screenshot here. This is the New Hampshire Aquatic Restoration Mapper on the right. And as you can see, there's a gigantic gap in data. That's our Saco River watershed, and also up here in the northwestern part of the state. There's about 1,000 crossings in the Saco River watershed. And so there's some work to be done here. And hopefully, you know, after next summer, we'll have filled in a lot of those gaps. But this is a great resource. It's a public resource that you can go to. And at the end of the presentation, you'll see a link to that. I'll share that with folks too. And what it does, all these colored squares show you how the aquatic organism passage is rated, how the geomorphic compatibility is rated. You know, is it a barrier to fish passage or other aquatic organism like turtle passage? Does it mimic the natural conditions of the stream? And also hydraulic vulnerability and structure condition are also rated on this. So it's a great resource. It's public, like I said. And then there's a non-public database of stream crossings and other infrastructure that we're going to be using out in the field when we enter our data. And this is the SADES, or the Statewide Asset Data Exchange System. And this is what they'll be using to run all of the models from the data to figure out hydraulic vulnerability and geomorphic compatibility and all that. So based on previous efforts, previous watershed-wide assessments, it's estimated that from 250 to 500 of these stream crossings may be in need of improvements. So, and that number could change as we move forward with the project and obviously accumulate more data and a better understanding of what's going on the ground.
And Tara, before you change slides, I just want to add that this particular mapper is now a key part, a key element in actually getting funding for ARM grants, so the Aquatic Restoration and Mitigation Fund. So this map is also super important, and they're using this data that we collect to actually fund projects as well. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, that's a great point, Diane. Thank you for adding that. Okay, so then, I just wanted to add this quote from John McGee. This was from our training the other day. He said, "This is important work. It makes a difference for communities and fish and turtles." And as Diane says, win-win. This is a win-win all around. It's a great way to make some progress, especially, I think, during these uncertain times with COVID-19. So a good project for us to do, but also great benefits long-term for communities. All right, hang on here. What's going on? I'm trying to advance here, and it's just give me a moment here. I'm having a little bit of a okay. There we go. All right, so what's the problem with inadequate stream crossing? So you can see up here we have a perched culvert. There's a free fall there. Basically, they can serve as a barrier and block fish and other aquatic species in migration and passage, reducing opportunities to recolonize or colonize areas. They can also alter natural erosion processes and sedimentation rates in a stream. And if you imagine like an undersized culvert, they can really amplify velocity during a storm event. You know, that culvert turns into somewhat of a fire hose and has a fire hose effect, increasing velocity and energy during those high flow events. And then, you know, inept culverts are also more susceptible to failure and washout. So all of these things can come into effect when the culvert is incorrectly placed or, you know, has suffered damage over the years, lots of flooding events and whatnot. Let's see, what else do I want to say about that? So here's a quote from Ben on the bottom, which I liked to share with folks. You can see the eastern brook trout on the bottom right hand of the screen, and that's you know, a fish of conservation. What is it? Species of greatest conservation need in the state of New Hampshire. And we actually work with a lot of local schools on the Trout in the Classroom program, also through New Hampshire Fish and Game, to teach about the conservation need for this species of fish and habitat connectivity. And Ben says close to half of the fish species of greatest conservation need have to migrate to complete life cycles. So this habitat connectivity and aquatic organism passage is something that is a big piece of these stream surveys, and we can have a big positive impact by repairing some of these crossings. Okay, and then another thing that we're going to be rating using the data that, the information that we acquire through the surveys is the geomorphic compatibility, and that's basically just how the structure fits with the river and the river's form and processes, and the hydraulic capacity, so the ability of the structure to transport predicted flows under storm events. And the increasing frequency of severe rain events in recent years has pointed to the need for proactive planning to mitigate potential flood hazards and environmental impacts. There's actually a Dartmouth College study that states that severe precipitation events have increased by 53% in the Northeast since the mid-1990s. So these poorly performing culverts can cause serious flooding, erosion, overtopping. That's when the water goes over the road. So you can see here in this picture of the flood damage in Crawford Notch from 2017. And also, you know, pooling, a decline in water quality, and obvious in this picture, damage to infrastructure, property, roads, and a safety hazard as well to the public. So the modeling that will be done will help determine the hydraulic capacity of structures to withstand 10, 25, 50, and 100-year flood events. So here's just a slide to show you the number of crossings that are estimated by town in the Saco River watershed. So this summer, you can look over here on the chart and you can see Effingham's got 39, Freedom 39, and Ospey 100. And that doesn't include the trail crossings, because we're also looking at trail crossings. There's estimated to be about 23 or so trail crossings in those towns. It takes approximately 1 hour per crossing to do the survey. There's about 93 points of data that need to be collected at each site. And you can see in the photo, a lot of our equipment, that much of which we borrowed from New Hampshire Fish and Game, but some of it we acquired through a generous donation from Thrivent Financial. But we're a long ways away, I have to say, from our goal. We need a lot of more financial support to make this program, make this project happen in the Ospey watershed towns. We've had some support recently from the Davis Conservation Foundation, which is wonderful, but we're estimating it's going to cost about $40,000 to make this project happen in the Ospey watershed. And we're set up in a great way this summer. We're in a great position to pursue this project and to move forward with it because we have these wonderful AmeriCorps members, Ellie Stormer and Sarah Goldsmith, working with us, and they've been with us since November of 2019. They not only have a lot of experience doing field work, water quality monitoring since November for our rivers program, but also both are proficient with GIS, Geographic Information System, which we'll be using a lot for this project. So we're very lucky to have them, and they're not doing their culverts assessments yet. They've just staged these photos the other day for me. All right, so benefits to communities. So communities will receive comprehensive assessments of the culverts, including the structural information, the conditions, the stream impairments, and this assessment data will be uploaded to the New Hampshire Aquatic Restoration Web Mapper, which I showed you earlier on, for easy access for the public, for other stakeholders, and for town officials. And towns will also receive an understanding of the aquatic resources, especially through the fish surveys, including wildlife and habitat, that can also be used to inform future restoration or conservation projects. You'll be receiving reports and data, analyses, and recommendations following the surveys. And these can help inform prioritization and planning of culvert improvement or replacement projects. They can also assist with the development of master plans and other community planning documents. and inform annual and or multi-year municipal budgeting, and support grant applications and requests for funding. So as Diane said, this information that's entered into the New Hampshire Aquatic Restoration Mapper is essential for getting that ARM funding from New Hampshire DES. So next steps, the data analysis and reporting will happen for Ossipee, Effingham, Freedom later in the summertime, probably in August at some point once we've finished the surveys. And then we'll start to seek funding for large scale infrastructure upgrades following these assessments. And we'll work with the state and other agencies on culvert vulnerability prioritization and modeling, and try and figure out and determine these high priority crossings, such as those known to be frequently flooded, damaged, or included in hazard mitigation plans for towns. So we'll target specific funding sources for high priority projects, and the overall Saco River project for the entire Saco River, we've been talking about a funding goal about 50 million to 100 million actually, which will be refined as we get better estimates. But it's estimated that crossings may cost upwards of 200,000 each to repair or replace. So, and this is based on past watershed surveys. And like I said earlier in the presentation, about 250 to 500 may need to be replaced or restored. And again, that we'll know that figure better as we move along with the surveys. So once we have that prioritization completed and have worked with towns and mainly road agents, Department of Public Works, other town officials, and other community stakeholders to identify those stream crossings with the highest priority, we can start to look for funding and target those private or federal or state funding resources to open up fish passage and vulnerable or valuable habitat, and open up areas and repair crossings that are known to be associated with water quality degradation and flooding events and so on and so forth. So you might have some questions about this project. I'm trying to think from a town official or local resident standpoint. So why is Green Mountain Conservation Group coordinating this effort? So it aligns really well with our mission of healthy waters, healthy communities, and that's our motto. But our mission of protecting natural resources in the Ossipee watershed, and we work with those 7 towns in the Ossipee watershed, and all of them need to have this information updated and put into the state database. It also aligns really well with our educational programs, the Trout in the Classroom program, the Volunteer Biological Assessment program, many of which we've done for 14, 15 years now. And like I said before, we're in an excellent position with the current AmeriCorps members to carry this project out. It's also a great opportunity to work with partner organizations to collect the data needed to help secure this funding for improvements in the infrastructure and the aquatic organism passage across the watershed. So what if there's a structurally unsound culvert found? Is the town liable? So this has come up, I guess, in past watershed-wide culverts assessments. It has never happened in past surveys where there was an incident or an accident where somebody got hurt. But the data that we're collecting is not going to be used to enforce any regulations. It's for informational purposes only. It's going to inform those modeling efforts and to help with prioritization of culverts in need of repair or mitigation. And Green Mountain Conservation Group will alert town staff and police departments when the surveys will start in case there are any calls about suspicious vehicles on the side of the road and that sort of thing. So really what we want to do is keep the lines of communication open with towns and make sure, you know, you feel like you can be engaged and aware of what's going on at all times. And where will the funding come from in the future for these repairs? Like I mentioned, estimates around 200,000 per stream crossing. That's a big chunk of change. So it's going to be a combination of private, state, and federal resources. So New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, the Aquatic Resource Mitigation Fund that Diane mentioned earlier, New Hampshire Moose Plate, Trout Unlimited's Embraces Stream, and the Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture, federal funds. Also, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. They have a couple of programs, Bring Back the Natives and New England Forests and Rivers Fund. And then the Wildlife Conservation Society, they have a Adaptation Fund, New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, National Fish Passage Program. USDA has, the NRCS has Environmental Quality Incentive Program, and then FEMA has a Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. So there's lots of, a combination probably of a lot of these will help to propel us forward to actually doing the work and improving some of these stream crossings in the future. And then finally, will surveyors be going onto private property? No, they will not. We're working in the right of way on the road and in the water body itself, and we'll respect all posted signs if there are any. And, you know, obviously avoid any conflict. If someone does approach the surveyors, we do have information and handouts that we can share with them. And like I said, we would be in contact with town officials and the police department to notify of the surveys happening. So here's some resources that you can check out. And I can share this. Some of these are already on our website. So gmcg.org is an easy place to go. It's easy to find under our research, the Stream Crossings Assessment Project. There's some great guides that North Country Council, I saw that Ashley joined us, has created or have created. There's the mapper there in that link. And I created a stream crossings video, pretty straightforward video for the layperson to better understand stream crossings and what we're looking at. And then the New Hampshire DES Stream Crossings Initiative. And I just want to say special thanks once again to Diane, Ben, Ashley, and all the folks here who have been helpful in various aspects of this project. I'd also like to mention we have some wonderful volunteers, Karen and Vic Vitek, who are going to be helping to carry out the surveys this summer. So when you see them on the side of the road getting eaten by mosquitoes and black flies, make sure you give them a friendly wave. And remember, what's good for the fish is good for the roads. Transportation for all, from Diane. I love that quote. And that is my presentation. So we'll just hold your questions. You can add them to the chat feature. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pull up Ben's presentation.
Tara, while you're doing that, there was someone had mentioned in the chat, Freedom had, now I can't find it, of course, in my, they had mentioned Freedom had more crossings than I think what was on the list. And
okay.
just so folks know, the list that the initial screen, if you will, is really looking at just river and or water body, stream, river, tributary, whatever, small, big, looking at that and road crossings, designated state roads, town roads, and then also trails. So there's, you know, there's definitely some that are missing, and there's definitely some out there that are not on the particular layer. So if the numbers don't match up exactly, don't be nervous. So this is just a place to start.
Yeah,
Good to point
Diane,
out, Dave.
that was me, Rick Vanderpool. I see Kamal's on there. I can verify that, yeah, we had a lot more culvert crossings of public roads than that. But I think the report, which I just looked up, cited something like 54 of them that had some moderate or high level of concern. So that was just a point that there's a lot more out there than I think we're aware of.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would add that every single study, and I'm sure Ben can say the same thing, every single one of them, we have definitely identified additional crossings that were not on this list. And Tara, we can talk about methods as far as how you guys want to identify those. I mean, we just came up with separate codes. So using the alphabet each day so that we never had crossover by the different teams or whatever. But anyway, but yes, absolutely, Rick. It does not surprise me that there's more out there than what's on the list. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, so can everyone see Ben's presentation on the screen at this point? How's that look? Ben, are you there?
Yeah, it's up and running.
Yeah.
All right,
yeah,
good.
I can see it fine. So,
Great.
So good evening, everyone. I just thought it might be helpful to go through the process we took in a watershed, the Warner River watershed, which is to the west of Concord, near Lake Sunapee and Mount Sunapee. And this is a collaborative effort with a local Trout Unlimited chapter and generally interested watershed residents. And we didn't have a lot of information for this watershed as far as stream crossings or fish. So starting back in 2012, we did baseline fish surveys throughout the watershed, and we found a lot of brook trout populations, and that got everyone excited, and we decided to slow down a little bit and spend a lot more time in this area and really try to quantify the condition of the habitat in the area. And it took us 3 years because we utilized volunteers to do the crossing assessments, and we didn't have dedicated staff to spend full weeks at a time to look at the stream crossings. So that's been refined now that we have interns and other staff able to do these crossings. But we came up with about 191 crossings throughout the watershed, and we were fortunate to have a great deal of information on the fish communities with over 240 survey locations within the watershed. And so we took our data to the communities within the watershed. We met with Conservation Commission, select boards, and public works agencies within the communities, and made specific maps with the crossing assessment results so that the towns could have them and cross-reference, potential problematic culverts that they have just from an infrastructural perspective. And having such a large quantity of crossings, we needed to find a way to come up with a standardized way to identify high priority crossings. And so we worked with a graduate student from Plymouth State to incorporate the crossing assessment data and our fish survey data, as well as some other GIS mapping landscape characteristics, and developed a replacement prioritization model. And then we took those results to the towns and encouraged them to put some of these crossings onto their high priority mitigation lists. And having structures on those lists towns eligible to receive mitigation funding before it becomes competitive at the arm level. So if a community has a project within the boundary that an impact can't be mitigated for or avoided, the town has direct access if they have this priority mitigation list to that funding. And then we've gone to the point now that we're beginning to apply for funding to address problematic culverts within the watershed. Okay, next slide.
Sure.
Awesome, thanks. So this is a quick representation of what our model does. And for the Warner River watershed, there was a strong impetus on brook trout. That was our focal species. But essentially, there's three major parameters that go into our model. Details specific about the culvert, details specific about brook trout populations, and the amount of distance that would be reconnected if a crossing was addressed, and then some landscape variables to identify opportunities to do projects in more pristine areas versus projects in more impacted areas. And within these three major categories, there's several parameters, and they can all be weighted separately based on what you're trying to identify. Maybe for a road agent, the culvert parameters would be the focal of this model, but we incorporated all components of these parameters into our model. It essentially generates a comparative score for each crossing, and with that, we developed a list of about 25 or so high priority projects within the watershed, and some of them we recognize that it's a good opportunity to replace a culvert, but because there's a series of culverts in close proximity, that it would require multiple replacement projects to restore to get the greatest benefit. And some of the culverts had such a minimal perch, that outlet drop that fish have trouble moving through, that we identified them as a candidate for backwatering, where you could manipulate the stream bed so the bed elevation increases and the flow doesn't drop out of the culvert as much. Okay, and the last slide, please. And just a few take-home messages. When you incorporate, components of natural resource and ecosystem restoration, the pool of potential funding for towns, is significantly increased. And from what we've seen in the Warner River watershed, the priority crossings from our perspective, the ones that are barriers to fish, are usually an issue with the town road agents too. Inherently, they're undersized, so they have trouble accommodating higher flows. They tend to have more washout vulnerability and some flooding issues, and so those are usually in line with the crossings that we'd like to address as well. And moving forward, some of the services we hope to provide are supporting the QA/QC process during the culvert assessments. DES, for a good reason, has a very rigorous review process, and it's really comprehensive, and it's great to have that caliber of data that eventually comes out of it. We hope to run a similar model like this in the watershed to help identify priority culverts, and we're more than happy to help develop grant applications and come up with ideas for project designs, and even potentially provide cost estimates. And as Tara mentioned earlier, these are some of the groups that could potentially provide some of that non-traditional funding for crossing replacement projects.
Okay.
And that's it.
All right, thanks, Ben. Let me get out of this screen. Okay, and I'm just gonna go to the chat feature. If anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the chat feature and we'll get to them. Okay, so I see what Rick was talking about earlier here. Okay, so Ted Lavery is asking to see if NRCS funding and or design assistance has been sought. Many main projects on dirt road designs are available from Bangor NRCS. Diane, I don't know if Diane is back on. I don't see her.
Just a suggestion, I'll follow up with, we've worked with some NRCS folks up in the upper Penobscot and the Bangor area that have done some of this work. And they've got a lot of good designs for, you know, for dirt road improvements and bridge replacements along with culverts. So I'll follow up with you and send you those contacts.
Okay, great. I do know that NRCS is one of the project partners. I don't know in what capacity they're going to be involved, but Ashley Newell might have something to add about that. I'm not sure. But Diane is currently trying to reconnect here. So we might circle back around to your question, Ted, in just a moment here. Mark Longley asks, what town groups will be informed of imminent surveys and what is the method for notification? So at this point, Mark, towns have been notified, conservation commissioners from the towns that are being surveyed this summer have been notified. And we've posted some announcements and shared some fact sheets and other handouts and resources with those town officials. And we also have our webpage up. We'll also be putting public notification in newspapers, local circulating newspapers, to let folks know when we're going to be starting those surveys. So a lot of different methods. Another method we have is the YouTube channel that GMCG now has. We have a stream crossings video, and all of that is also posted on social media as well. Let's see. Hang on. Let me get back up here. You had another part to your question here. Ben, how did the towns respond to your work and recommendations? Have they made progress?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we were fortunate, and I think Green Mountain Conservation Group is taking a similar approach, is you know, having everyone involved in the early stages of the crossing assessment process. And a lot of the Conservation Commission members in the communities actually did the assessment, so they were familiar with the whole process and the end goal. And we finalized our priority culverts in 2019, and right now we have one town really excited. They realize that they're going to be able to have, if we get funding, an appropriate crossing for a lot less draw on the town itself. And the town of Warner has agreed to facilitate all the construction and supply materials for a crossing replacement project, where we have funding pending in the ARM grant application right now. And essentially we're just looking for the cost of the structure, and the town will take care of all the other costs associated. So they understand the value of the match right now. So.
That's great. I just want to piggyback on what you started out saying, in that one of our goals is to involve and engage towns throughout this process. That's the reason for this informational meeting. And I would encourage anyone who's interested to come out in the field. You can contact me at education@gmcg.org. and let me know that you're interested in coming out and just observe what we're doing and perhaps lend a hand with taking some of the measurements and collecting some of the data. So you're welcome to come out in the field with us and see what it's all about as well. All right, so Diana's back.
Tara,
Hi, yes.
I'm back.
Oh, good.
Sorry, I had a
That's
cell
okay.
phone that died. My other phone is missing, and so now I'm on my husband's phone. That was going to die, but I'm good. But one thing that I wanted to add that I think is really important is by doing it in the way that, you know, we're doing it now, it enables towns, those that do have the capacity to be a little bit more involved and those that don't, to be equally on the playing field as far as, you know, if they want to come out, they definitely can. If they can provide, you know, in-kind match, they can. If they can't, that's not a big deal. It's still a part, they're still a part of the project. And I think that's really important, especially in our North Country areas where, you know, the capacity for towns is sometimes not very big. And, you know, by doing it in this group way, you know, it lets them know that they're just as important. And I think it's really good to have that engagement on all levels.
Right, and ultimately, you know, the towns are the decision makers on restoration or replacement of, you know, the culverts. And when we're applying to grants and these different private, state, federal pools of funding, these funders need to know that municipal decision makers are on board as well. So having you all engaged at this point in the process and throughout, I think is critical.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let me get back to our questions here. Diane, while you were off, Ted Lavery had a question about NRCS funding to see if any funding has been sought. He says many main projects on dirt roads designs are available from Bangor and RCS. And I know NRCS is involved in the project, but I'm not quite sure in what capacity and about the funding. I didn't know if you had any insight into that.
Yeah, sure. So basically, at least in my experience thus far, I mean, they're definitely a willing partner. And to the point where at this point, Don Kierstead has authorized, and Ashley probably knows a little bit more as far as the hands-on right now, but I know that at this point they've, or he's authorized a group to be able to collect some information in the North Conway area. I think it's on the West Side Road. And so definitely this is actually the first time we've had sort of boots on the ground from NRCS. So that's exciting. As far as the engagement with them in the Androscoggin, it's been more on the latter side with the implementation piece and applying for EQIP and that type of community grants funding that comes from them. So in this project, we're actually going to have twofold. We'll have some boots on the ground from them and that funding source, and then also have the opportunity for actual restoration and the funding from their grants that they have. So pretty exciting.
That's great. Okay, moving down, Tyson Morrill asked, how do you plan on working with other groups to assess crossings within the same town that is located in different watersheds? So this is a good question. So Sandwich, I think, is a good example of this. It's in 2 different watersheds. Our efforts would be concentrated on just the crossings that are within the Ospey watershed. So I think, Tyson, maybe you're from Squam. So that is how we would work on those. And I'm not sure if we would necessarily be combining efforts in the field if we're doing, you know, Ospey watershed crossings only. But yeah, collaboration with equipment and resources, sure. If we have the means to do so, we would definitely collaborate in that respect. And then, do you think it would be easiest to wait until the QA/QC is completed to provide more info to the towns as a joint effort? Yes, that is a good point. So the QA/QC that happens once all the data is provided to the SAIDS program, and then state officials have a chance to look that over. And Diane, Ben, you can feel free to comment on this as well. But yes, I think once the QA/QC is completed on all of the information that we collect, then that would be the point at which we would present the information to the towns. And possibly as a joint effort. That's a great suggestion. And if you're doing the crossings in Sandwich this summer, definitely, that would be great to collaborate on that. Thanks for that suggestion, Jason.
I would say that you're absolutely right, Tara. I mean, the way the process works is we do not, I mean, and I'm sure you guys don't either. I mean, there's no presenting back to the communities until the QA/QC process is done. So until NHGS gives its green light that that they have no more questions, then the process is they then send the data to, or give the green light to Chris at SAIDS, and then SAIDS, runs its stuff, gets all the numbers acquired and fills in the blanks behind the scenes. And then that data then goes to the ARM mapper, to the public viewer. So yeah, at that point, I mean, there'll be definitely some, coinciding of processes, because obviously you don't want to wait 2 months down the road to be able to meet with communities. But at the same time, yeah, nothing happens until the QA/QC is definitely checked.
Right. So my initial thought of doing this while our AmeriCorps members are still around in August may or may not happen, depending on that QA/QC timeline. So we'll have to see what happens. That'll be to be determined, and we'll let everybody know when everything's ready to be presented. So moving on, Rick asked, does it make sense to factor into the model coordinating with fish and game projects that have improved trout habitat, for example, to increase the investment of resources into measurable success?
And if I could just add a comment, I say this from the Tin Mountain Conservation Center's perspective, and I know Ben and Diane certainly know about our project work since 2010. We've done woody additions on about 18 miles of stream, most of that in the Saco River watershed, and have done some, cursory checks on culverts there. But with that kind of investment of time and resources, I just wondered if that made sense as well.
Yeah, we spoke about this today. Yeah, Trout Unlimited National just received a grant over $1 million to help add wood to streams in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And we were hoping the crossing assessments and fish community surveys within the Saco would lead us to areas where we could do a more holistic project, a crossing replacement as well as a wood addition, to kind of return everything back to a more fully functioning system.
Excellent.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that we're looking at, in doing this whole statewide effort. I mean, the two last spots that I say, there's some watersheds that are incomplete still, but the two big spots that Tara had mentioned are the Upper Connecticut and the Saco. And so right now, for the past few years, we've been doing some temperature stuff and trying to do some fish stuff here and there, depending on where we can allocate assets. And now the idea is to really get a great perspective on a watershed scale and be able to tie in all this work that the different groups are doing to be able to do just a really, really great successful project. So I think absolutely, Rick, we would be collaborating for sure.
Great.
Okay, I don't see any other questions here. Does anyone have another question that they'd like to ask Diane or Ben? We're really fortunate to have them at the meeting this afternoon. And this is, I think, one of the things that Zoom is good for, is that I'm sure half of us probably wouldn't have been able to get together physically anyway because of our distance. But does anyone have any more questions for Ben, Diane, myself, or any concerns? Feel free to share with me, education@gmcg.org. We have a lot of great minds working on this project, and the more municipal decision makers that we have participating in the project all along that endorse the project, the higher likelihood of obtaining these large funding, resources that are required to make the improvement. So really encourage you to share this program and what you've learned this evening with your town officials and other stakeholders. So any last questions, concerns? Sounds like everyone's.
I just want to say thank you to you guys, because obviously the state is day by day here. So we're not really sure what's going to happen as far as electrofishing. I'm hoping to still get out there, and maybe it's just, me and one other person and Ben and one other person, and we're just going to try to target what we can. But so thank you to you guys for still pressing forward, because I think that it's great, and I'm crossing fingers that come July, we'll be back to normal, but who knows? And so it's great that you're still focusing on moving forward. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Diane, and thanks for all your support. And you as well, Ben and Ashley, if you're still on here. Yeah, Ashley's still around. So in the next few weeks, I'll be updating everyone with our next steps and reaching out to the towns to let you know when the actual surveys will begin. It'll happen sometime in the next few weeks. We're just getting together all of our maps and potential crossing sites to survey and schedules and all of that. But thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. It's 6 o'clock and I think we can adjourn.
Good job, Tara.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody.
There you go.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks for joining us.